Hello, Parsons students. In my Collab Design for Literacy class, this is our week 6 to 7 briefing video. And this is an important one, so you got to make sure, as they say, you watch this till the end, as we are transitioning between ending one project, our baby board book project, and beginning our new project, our storybook project. So it's important that you understand that we got two deliverables this week. We've got to finalize, finish, and package your InDesign file for your baby board book and get that. Must be ready for me by Thursday, if not earlier, uh, at the end of class on Thursday, so that we can work here on prepping those to be sent to the printer so that the printer can print 3 copies of the book and get us those copies by the end of this month. And when we'll be having a photo shoot and taking pictures with your books and of portraits of you, and lots of fun. And the second deadline is that we are starting our uh, children's storybook, and that you have a part one research concept deck due ready for presenting in our next Thursday, in the upcoming class this Thursday, where you'll be presenting your story and research behind the story, design inspiration around that story, and a concept statement in the same way we started off our baby board book design. So that's the quick version of what we're doing. And now let's dive into all the details, because these are important details and I want to make sure everybody does things right. So again, baby board book part 6 is our final installment of the baby board book design, or at least in terms of getting it into production. So that's going to be due. And then the storybook part 1, the research presentation, that's going to be also due. So baby board book part 6, final files. This is the checklist, the punch list of what's due. You need to apply any last revisions or edits. We had a great review session with Demi. Lots of good feedback, but more importantly, lots of good design, lots of good input that you guys gave in terms of the way you finalized, realized your baby board book layouts, and things are looking really great overall. Few of you have a little more work to do than others, and it's important that those of you who are not as caught up as the rest catch up this week and get that done, because again, the deadline for this printing must be met. Otherwise, you'll miss the bus and you won't have your books ready on time. So I encourage those who are still working to get those last revisions done. And you must collaborate with me, like send me what you're working on so I can look at it and say cool or not cool, or change this or whatever, so that by Thursday, everything is done with your baby workbook and I have those files. And then review text one last time. Make sure you just read it. Some of you, we had comments about like really looking at the text again, but most of you had good text. Run spell check, make sure everything's right. And then the big important thing, if you have colored pages that go off, or illustrations that go off the edge of the book, you have to make sure you have your bleeds, that your boxes, your picture boxes extend to open wider. I'll show you that a little bit more in detail coming up. And then packaging your files. Now, packaging is a technical term. It's a command that you give in InDesign on the scroll down menu. And what packaging does, it automatically collects your InDesign file and makes a PDF out of it. It connects to all the links. And when I say links, I mean things like imported files, like JPEGs or TIFFs, or however you've created, whether it's Photoshop or Illustrator, or however you created it, and you output those into they could be PNGs, JPEGs, TIFFs, and then you import those into the InDesign file. It's important that those are included so that when I get your files, I will have all the source files, because I need to make another PDF that's going to be sent to the printer. So I need everything that you have, including fonts. If you're using Adobe fonts, you don't have to worry. But if you're using fonts that are not Adobe fonts, those must be included, and packaging will collect those. They'll collect everything that's missing, or they'll tell you they're missing. Because the thing you don't want to have a holdup on is me having to email you saying, I'm missing the pictures of the crazy eyes that are on page 2, and I don't have the font. I definitely don't have Comic Sans, so Emily, make sure you send me that Comic Sans so that I can use it for this and for upcoming projects, now that I'm a Comic Sans believer. And then once you have the package file, that's what you send to me. You send me a folder full of different files that come out of the packaging. Okay, so this is, again, the template that you've been working with. A reminder, some of you desecrated the dirt logo. You must not move it. It must be in this place exactly. There's a white box around here that you don't see if there's a color behind here. The dirt logo on the spine must be there. This must be here. Everything else is up to you. And here again, here's the where the white ends is where the live area, where the book actually trims. The inner sort of red line here is just sort of like the warning sign, like you're getting close, but that's still a live area. And then the red in the gray part outside the white, that is how big your image boxes need to be if you have images that bleed. That's the bleed we're talking about. Make sure that you can open your box up that wide, and the color, the illustration will continue on so that you're not trimming the book exactly at where your illustration is, because there's a chance they might miss and there'll be like a white line, and we do not want that. That's unprofessional. It'll make you crazy if that happens. So make sure we bleed all our images off each edge. And then make sure you're using this template. You have 8 spreads that I've been monitoring. I think everybody pretty much has their 8 spreads, not one more, one less. Don't be the one where I have to email you and say you've got too many spreads or you're missing one. Like, that's going to be difficult to deal with. And here's an example of this bleed idea. So if you see on the left side on the back, you can see when I change the slide how the box closes. So here's the box down here. The box is closed, and that's the actual size of the book. But when the bleed is there, there's actually color that going this far away. That's what I'm talking about. Like, make sure that you're doing that extra box size all the way around if you've got color or image like this person has in their design. Again, remember the spine. Keep your text going from top to bottom like this. Make sure the title of your book is there. Your name, the dirt logo must not be touched. You can change the color if you have to, but I'd recommend black or white. Keep all this in here. And again, there's a part in here in this third line, first paragraph, where it says, this dirt book was designed and illustrated in 20, and we'll put 24 by, and then your name will be here. Communication design student from Parsons School of Design. So make sure your name is also there, or I'll put it in, but put it in there so I don't spell it wrong. And then when it comes to packaging, so here's the InDesign file, and up here at the top menu, the first menu item is File. If you enable that and you go down here, it says Package. That's the packaging set button that I want you to all go through once everything is done. Once you're ready to go, the bleeds are done, everything, you've spell checked it, you refined all the designs, everything's in place, then you package it, and it will create a new InDesign file. It'll create an IDML file that can be opened by any version of InDesign. It'll create a PDF. Make sure you indicate you want to collect your links, you want to collect your fonts, and then it will do all that. And then here, it'll give you a summary, and if something's messed up, like here it says 2 fonts are missing. So that means, uh-oh, I missed something. And go back and look for what those fonts are to make sure you have those connected. Usually it's fonts and missing images that become a problem. And sometimes the bleed not being done and having to stretch out pictures or so I'll contact you next week after I get the files if something's up, but let's try to avoid that. Okay, so that's basically what you have to do. Again, if you're still refining things, share with me this week before Thursday, just to I can get an okay or give you any last minute advice or decisions. There's 2 files there's 2 assignments on Canvas. This is one of them, Baby Board Book Parks Part 6. And it's got the template in here in case you still haven't used it. I'm sure you have it, but there it is. And there's also here a little packaging PDF explanation demo. It just kind of goes step by step. It's a PDF without me talking, but you can read through that if you're having trouble. So it's right here, the second link. And then the Google Drive, make sure you upload all that with your name on it so that we can begin working on it on Friday coming up. And over the weekend. Yes, over the weekend. Okay, so Design for Literacy Drive. You have the Google Drive, and there's the Baby Board Book and also the Children's Part 1. So there's 2 new ones, so make sure you don't mix those up. And then let's now switch gears to talking about our storybooks and the storybook design project that we're doing now. Now, we've been working specifically on a target audience of toddlers, infants, newborns, infants, toddlers, and now we're going into a higher level of targeting children who are 4 and I will say, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, 13. depending, somewhere in that kind of childhood, mid to later childhood age. And the idea of these storybooks, the most ideal use of your book is going to be not individuals reading it, although that's okay. But we want to really encourage the dynamic between a family members when you're being read to by a parent or by a loved one, and that it's a child interacting with an adult, or an older kid, reading together, reading aloud, turning the page together, interacting, looking, not quite as much as the baby board book, because this is more about now listening and looking at images. But think about this now as an older audience, and think about this now as being part of the literacy process, which is, of course, in a traditional way, academic literacy, like learning to read, learning to understand letters and sounds. But more importantly now, as we're getting older, I want to kind of not have that priority about learning the mechanics of language. I want to go more into the idea of storytelling and the power of storytelling and the importance of learning lessons as a child and becoming familiar with the realities of life, and knowing that there's obstacles that we face as kids, as grown-ups, as individuals. There's challenges. We have to know how to be our best selves, to overcome adversity, to do the right thing in situations where the right thing might be the hard thing to do. So really what I'm wanting us to focus on, coming from like being the dirt person now, not the Parsons professor, like I want us to be a team of designers that are thinking about helping enable kids and their family members to better understand the world as it is, and the world and the challenges that reality brings, and to not be afraid to go beyond the idealistic point of view that we wished the world was like, but instead help arm each of us with the kind of stories that will help us know what to do and when the time comes. So basically here at the screen says going beyond academic literacy, and what I'm trying to say in this kind of briefing in terms of the tone, the vibe that I want us to have is that we're not teaching people how to read. We're not teaching people the letters. We're not teaching English in terms of its mechanics, but more in literature, and more about the power of storytelling and how stories inform us on how to do the right things, and the incredible kind of need for stories, how they seem kind of frivolous. You can think of a story, it's like kind of like, oh, you're telling stories, or it's like something you do when you don't have it, when you want to pass the time. But no, stories are actually they're a component of art, and art serves a very specific human purpose, and it's not a purpose that has anything to do with science or the materialist thinking that science brings. It's about having something that we can understand about being human that transcends what we can see, in reality, what we can see through measured results. And I want to read this quote here from a guy named Andrew Clavin that kind of talks about stories in the context of art and the importance of it to us as humans. So stories are not just entertainment. A story records and transmits the experience of being human. It teaches us what it's like to be who we are. Nothing but art can do this. There is no science that can capture the inner life. No words can describe it directly. We can only speak of it in metaphors. We can only say it. It's like this story, this picture, this song. Art can only do that. Music and stories, most importantly, can do that. Stories can tell us something about who we are that's hard to quantify in normal analysis. There's a lesson to be learned in seeing someone else's experience. There's watching and seeing and being motivated by what we have seen in the past, what we've been told about the past, and how those past events directly correlate to the challenges we face today. The things in the stories, the situations in the stories, although they may have happened a long time ago, still are relevant to the daily challenges we have now, or what we may be facing tomorrow or the next day or beyond. And what I want our stories to be really directed towards is trying to find that kind of moral. Like, what is the principle What is the lesson? What are we trying to teach kids in a way that they can better navigate through life and be prepared for it? So when it comes to that, it's about really understanding the human experience. And I want you guys to be in that context. Like, what is it about life that makes it unique? What is it about life that makes it beautiful? And when I say beautiful, I mean this idea that it goes beyond just the subjective version of beauty, like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Sure, it is in the eye of the beholder, but beauty is also something objective, something that is true no matter what, something that's bigger than our own selves, bigger than humanity itself. It's a higher level of transcendence. And I want us to have that understanding that humanity is based around collaborating with that higher power, with that beauty, and being part of that in our experience. And so to do that, we have to recognize that we're not just material beings. We're not just science walking around responding to random events, but we actually have an inner life, that each of us are valuable because we have an inner life. And that's part of what the Enlightenment taught us. That's what we've learned through Western civilization and other civilizations as well, thinking about who we are and how we were created and where we came from, and the fact that we're important because there's something bigger than just the materials that make us, but that we transcend that at a higher level and that we have inner value and our inner lives and us as individuals matter, each one of us. So to do that also, it's about seeing life as it is, not as we wished it was. And I'm saying this because this is where the reality part of life comes in. And this is a philosophy of thinking about the world and seeing it as, although full of potential, full of beauty, also the brokenness of the world, the fact that bad and evil things happen, and that we can't just count on the idea of systems being at fault or systems being something that will correct those things, but seeing that as the nature of life and the nature of reality, that bad things happen, but there's a higher level that helps us overcome that and helps us transcend all potential problems. And it has to do with love and beyond love, like the creator of love and the creator of us. So I want us to not just be in this kind of utopian mindset where we think we can fix things if we just pass the right laws or swallow the right pills. No, the world is broken and we need to understand how we can better respond to that and be ready to that through the stories we hear and talk about. And that all has to do, again, with this idea of providing a belief in a greater good. So for us to be able to transcend all these issues that make life negative, that make life cause us to be down or cynical, and for us to also know that we have an obligation to do the right thing, we have to believe that there is a greater good. There is truth, goodness, and beauty that are above all things, and that's why we have human rights, because we're made in an image of something bigger and greater, and that each of us have value and that we have an obligation to do good and to do the right thing. Okay, so let's now let's transition to the idea of how that kind of big talk, that bigger scope of the world and our view can now, not taking that view, adapting that as designers and saying, okay, how do I respond to that within this book that I'm designing? And here I'm showing you just a few covers of many of the book projects that we've created. And of course, the first level of this book project is to be an engaging, exciting book that's gonna capture the imagination and the attention of a child. And with these covers, of course, make them want to go beyond the cover and learn about these stories. And I'm just showing you a kind of a random selection of books. And these are all fairly older. But the idea here with this, these are 8x10 books. They're soft cover. They're anywhere from, I think, 16 to 32, 36 pages. They can vary now, because what we're doing is we're creating digital on-demand printing. Like we can order one of these at any time and get it. So it's different than baby board books. The baby board books are being printed and we're going to get what we get, and then we can't just keep ordering them. And you will have a chance to order more once we see our first round of books. I'll give everybody a chance to order more baby board books, but it's like a one-time thing. Last year, somebody ordered like 60 of them. So you can do that, but these books here are going to be more on demand. They'll be on Blurb, a website that has on-demand books, and you'll be able to order them anytime you want through the coming years, unless I take them down or something. But so anyway, these books, 8 by 10, they're a fixed size again. They're color. You can do a black and white book, but they're 4-color process. Again, there's still no special treatments. There's no die cuts. There's no adding foil or mirrors or having a fold out page or changing the size. I love all that stuff. I wish we could do those things. And there are other, my other design class, we can do those things in my 4-3 topics class. But we are now I want you to be in a commercial mindset. And being in a commercial mindset means we have to create something that can be reproduced, that could be sold at an efficient cost, that could be made available, and that responds to the realities of manufacturing. So, and also to like a brand that is trying to have a consistent and cohesive output. So for Dirt, it's about having a row of books that all are the same size. And the difference within each book, outside of the size, is the idea that you bring to it and the illustration style and design language. And so within the project we're doing now, I want you to begin to think about how you can continue in your journey of being a Dirt designer, respond to what you see the brand as, and now you've all created one book. And wait a minute, let's slow down here. Let's make something very clear. You are now each book designers, children's book designers. Okay, you created one, or almost, some of you. So it's not a new thing for you. Like you've gone through the experience, you've learned from that experience, and now you're going to bring that learning, bring that knowledge, bring those mistakes that you don't want to do again to this project. And I think you want to also, as working as a team, we can now see how we're creating a series of books that are both cohesive, like under the Dirt umbrella, under this idea of this literacy project that's seeking to help kids who don't have access to books, seeking to bring families together in the reading experience, but also seeking to have a little different take on what it means to tell stories and what it means to have a kid aesthetic and a family aesthetic that doesn't have to be belittling or this kind of like silly kids aesthetic that doesn't assume a more level of sophistication that we all have. And so I want you to continue that thinking within these books. And like I was just talking about, bring on the narrative story and the idea of teaching a lesson, bringing a moral, helping somebody understand how they can live a life that's good, and how they can not just do what they should do, but what they ought to do as a human, as a citizen, as somebody who lives as a free person. So here we see just a different collection. You can see some of these are really obvious. The Three Billy Goats Gruff, like this is a good example of a classic story that we all know about, and that we should probably, it would be like, seems like right, we should have that kind of book in our children's library, in a family library, because the idea of having to get from one place to another and then have to a better place, the greener grass on the other side of the bridge, but the fact that there's a troll who's obstructing and trying to stop us and trying to defeat us, and how we have to overcome that between 3 goats. Like that's what I was talking about. Like that's a really important lesson, to know that there are going to be trolls, there's going to be obstacles, you're going to have goals that you're going to try to reach, that someone's going to stop you, and through not just force, but through cleverness, you can and thoughtfulness, you can overcome those obstacles, and good can defeat evil. So that's kind of a good example of like the thing we're trying to do. But you can also see here that we have like an Aesop book, The Ant and the Grasshopper, and that's like another kind of classic thing about storing your treasure so that when hard times comes, you're ready. And this is just done in a very simple but elegant vector art kind of way. Or Goldilocks, where you see that Goldilocks looks a little different than the typical Goldilocks that we're seeing, so that more people, different kinds of people, can relate to who Goldilocks is and can be that kind of person. So that's just a little twist of like bringing more diversity into the character, or also connecting with stories from other cultures. And this has been the main focus, since we have done a lot of these classic books from Western civilization. We've also expanded towards doing different books from different cultures, including this is like a Cherokee legend about how fire was brought to earth by animals. I think a spider brought it over the river somehow. Or even just the idea of modernizing an older story to reflect, to still have the same moral, but kind of reflect more of a relatable or updated scenario where somebody like Little Red Riding Hood does it a little bit differently. It's still the same story, but isn't in that kind of like gothic-y old style way, and it's modernized to be relatable. So when we're doing this now, you've all have picked a story, right? And as I said in class, that's the story you're starting with. And right now there could be things going on in your head. You might be thinking like, oh, why did I pick that story? I have regrets, or I love my story, but it seems kind of old fashioned. Or you might just be happy enough to do your story and you've got ideas, and that's great too. But from here, this is the time now where you have a chance to think, consider, and maybe branch off in a couple of different ways. And these 4 different ways are sort of the categories of stories that treatments that we have as options. So first, traditional text, create a book with traditional text with limited edits. So kind of just stick to the text, keep it kind of old fashioned. And I don't want you to think that old stories need to be modernized. I don't think they do. I think there's something cool about listening to a story in an older kind of English, or an older kind of language, or even older kind of visuals. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against that. And I can say that because I have now a collection of books that does that and goes beyond and is innovative and is minimalist and is, so we want a diverse family of books. So this is a perfectly great way to do it. And if you're like a real kind of like hardcore illustrator, talented, can make these sophisticated drawings, that might be your best option for you. And I'll show you an example of that coming up here. So there's that option. Then there's kind of next step is to upgrade the text, create a modernized, edited of the traditional story text. So the upgraded text can then take it and make it friendlier, simpler, maybe change it a little bit. Again, I'm not against changing it, but I want to make sure we change it with the right motivations. We might downplay the scarier, gruesome parts of a story, but they could still have realities of death or realities of pain, but make them in a way where we're implying them a little more subtly and not as blatantly. And then that can begin to transition even further to number 3, a revised story. So you take that story and you more than update it, you kind of revise it, you change it, or you create it in a way where it's kind of like based on a true story. It's like based on this story, and I'll show you an example, but it's now a new story of yours. It might be modernized. It might have the same kind of moral, the same kind of scenario, but it's shifted in a way where it's just not the same story anymore. It's just the same storyline. And then from there, you can go even further. And if you're somebody who can write stories and can create something new and can kind of reflect back on what we've been doing and do something that will fit right into that, then write an original story. And maybe and the story you pick now as a prompt might end up just being unrecognizable, but it got you to where you're at, and that's perfectly fine. Or maybe you don't even, maybe you just decided to pick a story and create a new original story. And I'm also realizing what I haven't said here is that there's an option also that beyond the list that I provided to pick a story from your childhood or from your culture. And last year, somebody did a story that their mother would tell her and her brother as kids, and she made it into a book and a digital book for the 3rd project, and it was incredible. And I'll show you that. Heard the story that her family made up, that she created a book into, as if it was a classic story or a children's tale or a folklore. I'll show it to you. It's great. So you can do that as well. That's kind of like making, and then so maybe that's 4, and then 5 is a new original story. So and the key to that too is also that you present that this coming week and talk about your story, that your new story or your newfound story in that context. And as I said in class, like the stories have to be in the public domain. They cannot be a contemporary story. Don't come to me with Frozen or Mulan and say you want to redo it. Like that's we don't own that. It has to be like before like 1920 or something and beyond, or you can look it up, you can Google it, but it needs to be a story that is in the public domain. So if you're not sure, ask me. So let's start looking at some, and quickly I'll go through these because I know this is taking a long time, but let's look at some examples of these dirt books. So this is The Tortoise and the Hare. It's an Aesop story or fable. And this is an example of using a traditional classic fairy tale or fable. And well, it's kind of hard to say it's modernized because they're just animals, but done in a modern way and done with modern English and not just taking the text and using it, just rewriting it and drawing it in a friendly vector sort of way. So here, this is the cover. And again, with the cover, it's important that you keep that dirt logo right where it's at. Um, and so in this book, oh, before we get into detail, some of the parts are going to be the dirt logo on the front. This is going to be a harder cover, and this is the first page because this is like a softer page paper. And this is the cover stock, and this is the text stock. And this will be the first page. Everyone's going to have a scribble, and this here, you don't touch it. Don't make it a color. Don't put anything here. That stays as is, except, no, it just stays as is. Oh, your name is down there, actually. And then this is the first spread, pages 2 and 3. And this is about dirt and about, and this is specifically a collaboration we were doing with Parent Child Plus. And then we're going to take a photo shoot with you guys. You're going to get a portrait made. That'll be here, and there'll be a bio about you and talk about your story in the first spread. And then this is the title spread. So I'm going to talk about that. I want everyone to have a title spread, and potentially at the end spread, you don't have to, but you have to have a title spread. So you have to kind of start the book with dignity. Don't just rush into it. And this is a very simple one. It could be more complicated. A title spread can even be the beginning of the book, like somebody's walking into the frame or whatever, but everyone has to have a title spread. And then the story starts. And here you see again, like it's all about making things simpler, modern, and taking the text in a way that's not in that traditional Aesop written way. And this is also a good example of doing something that doesn't require a high level of illustration skill. Yes, of course, these are great illustrations that take skill, and we all have skill, but it's not about rendering in this realistic way. It's done in a really attractive way. The colors, full bleed imagery, lots of motion and action, and just good layers of color. And then the text being done in a way that's easy to read and gives you a picture of what this place is like without having to fill in all the details of it. So this, I think, is a great example of a traditional story modernized a little bit, but kind of kept to the true idea of what the story was. And the tortoise wins the race. And when I say you can change the story, I don't think you should do one where the hare wins the race. I mean, if you have a good reason, maybe. But again, I don't want to turn it into some dystopian, dysfunctional, deconstructed, postmodern kind of a world. I want this to be about like facing reality as how it is and dealing with the problems with life through individual responsibility and in individual rigor and merit and overcoming problems because of your substantial way of thinking and living. And then, okay, so the last spread is going to be, or the last page. This is the cover itself, like the back cover. And we're going to have this like books by dirt, so you don't touch that either. So you get one more spread. Didn't see if there isn't a the end page here. So if you might want to put it at the end page because we have to have our books. You might want to put it at the end page if your book doesn't end in a number that's divisible by 4. And I'll explain that later, but basically we have to make sure we have the right amount of pages that it can cut up and fold into it. So sometimes we can insert a the end page if you're missing a spread, or take it out if you need one more spread. And here you see what I'm talking about there. It's an extra page because it needs to have pages that are divisible by 4. So we could have easily had a the end spread with this book. And then the back, the only thing you're not seeing here, there's a UPC code right down here at the bottom that has to be avoided. So that's going to be another thing. Okay, so that's the first example. And then the next one I want to show you is, this is just another example of a book that uses and I'll just skip that one. Here we go. So this is another one that uses a classic story that's not as well known, A Handful of Clay, and it does the same level of kind of bringing the story in its traditional, with a traditional feel to it, but then rewritten, edited to be a little more contemporary, but kind of sticking to it as a classic story. And then doing this technique where she uses paper and scans the paper and overlays her drawings onto the paper. And this designer wasn't, she can draw, but and she can draw really good actually. But she's not like, I've been drawing all my life and I draw every single day and I can't wait to draw again. And these are good examples of like telling a story in a way where the text is nice and big and clear, and we use exciting kind of layouts. And then here, even this kind of montage idea of showing the different steps of something happening is always a good way to have a spread that engages with kids. So you can kind of see what's happening as this clay gets transformed. It's a story about a clay who has biggest aspirations, but then finds itself being scooped up and then created into like what seems to be just like this useless form of an empty pot, and down about what the purpose of their life is about and why are they here, but then being filled with dirt and planted with a seed, and then with sunlight and time, the seed inside of her or him blooms, or her, I guess, blooms into a beautiful flower, and she understands the purpose of her life was to be the pot for a beautiful flower. And so that's what I mean in terms of like understanding, like bringing a great understanding that each of us has a purpose, our purposeness and sacrificing, and like these kinds of themes are the things I'm interested in. And there's the back. And then another book that we can look at. So this is a book where we use a Chinese folk tale. And in this book, this person, I don't know if they would say that they were like an illustrator person, but they really dove into the illustration style and created just a uniquely beautiful book, and kind of stuck to the traditional text of their Chinese fairy tale called The Flower Elves. And here you can see this style of illustration that is kind of vector based, but then has lots of textures and patterns incorporated into it. And I think it's just a matter of like her spending the time to create this style and build on it and build on it until it was just exactly how she wanted it to be. But as you can see here, as I go through quickly, it's just incredibly well done and beautiful. And I talk about this idea that in our class, we're not going to do projects that are like studenty, that are just kind of like cute and like, oh, look at you did a children's book. Like, no, this book and all the books that we're working at are kicking some serious ass in terms of like its level of design competency. And so I want to inspire you with this book to think, what can you do with this idea of your illustration styles and the story that you've chosen, and how can you create something at that level? Because I think that's very successful. And then another one, this is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I'm going to skip that one, but well, I'll just do it really fast. Basically, it's just this idea of spending the time, again, to take an idea, to take a traditional story. Whoops, that was fast. I guess I didn't set that right. So let's go to the next one. This is another one by, oops, here we go. This is called The Selfish Giant. And it's a story that by Oscar Wilde about a giant who lives by himself in this like walled city, and how kids sneak in, and he's annoyed by them at first and wants them to go away, and eventually he does kick them out. But then because of that, because the love is gone, winter comes, and he gets down and he misses the kids, and eventually he dies, and a kid comes to visit him. And it's basically told in this way that does face the idea of like loneliness and death and being different, being isolated, and deals with it in a kind of beautiful way. And then her choice of kind of creating almost a comic book style without it being a goofy comic book, but having these different modules that allow for a longer story to be told. Here he is. He's dead, right? He's dead in the book. So it does explain things that are super important, because kids do need to learn about this. It's how you talk about it too. So it's not, and this is Oscar Wilde. So I don't think it was written necessarily for kids. So but we do want to challenge people. And then in this case, she chose to, because it was such a long story, she chose to have a spread or two that actually told the story just without the cartoon style, which I thought was pretty smart or pretty interesting to have that option. And so that's also another example of kind of utilizing your own personal style. Like this is, again, there aren't illustration majors in my class. We're all communication designers. So she used what she had in a great way. Here's that Little Red Riding Hood book. And the way this works is that it's really about like taking a story that's very graphic and very gruesome. And it's about like, someone try to murder somebody else, and then turning the tables and having a woodsman Anyway, this one was about like really using minimalism, like creating a character that was different looking, that was kind of universal, giving her a blue tone so she could be of any culture, that anyone can relate to her. It's not like exclusive to any. Why is it doing this? Um, and and then the idea is to just use whiteness and just use simpleness to in the background to kind of be able to tell the story, have the traditional motifs of the Red Riding, of the Red Hood and the going to see the grandmother and walking through the forest, but there aren't any trees in this forest. There's just some indices of like a wolf. We don't ever see the wolf. We just see signs of the wolf. And we keep things in a way where the long journey is shown here, going through the woods and the brush and the marsh and the swamp. And it's done in such a simple, elegant way. And when you do this, it allows the listener or the reader to then have that story going on in their head. And then when it comes to confronting the wolf, she created this idea of the wolf being in a cave and grandma being in that cave and everything happening in this cave, which is just this arc of blackness. And that way we can have a lot of things happening without, and she's going after the wolf with scissors. And in this story, instead of the woodsman, she takes action. She uses her skills, her tools, and her courage to confront the evilness of the wolf and what they're trying to do to her loved one. So it's kind of the reaction, like we don't need a man to come in here, but I'm not trying to say you should do that, but because there's nothing wrong with a man coming in to fix something or a woman coming to fix something. But in this case, it's about you're going to fix your problem, and the wolf actually isn't the real problem that anyone's going to face. We're going to face the metaphor of the wolf trying to trick us into something that we don't want to do or trying to look like something that it isn't. And here we see grandma being saved from the wolf simply by being an arm being pulled out of the cave, pulled out of the circle. And it just takes away all that kind of like, nasty, scary stuff that is really in the book, which I'm not saying is wrong, but this is another way of doing it here. And here we can see the dialogue going on in this kind of like smart spread. And we have even how big your eyes are, that whole ears thing, like that happens in this book. And it ends in this just sort of like empowering spread of a satisfied Red, as we call her, not Red Riding Hood, who was able to overcome this challenge using her skill sets and her courage. Okay, and there's an ending page. Okay, so that's a great, great book. And something that each of you could easily do. So it's a matter of thinking about this and like how can you take your story and look at it in this kind of way. This is the same designer. She did an internship with me, so she was able to do more books than just one. And this is the idea of taking a classic story and then changing it slightly, but still being the same story, but just making it kind of like a twist. So Jack and Jack is actually the same story as Jack and the Beanstalk, but it turns out that Jack in this story was also the name of the giant. He happens to have the same name. You know how that happens sometimes. So Jack and Jack is about the giant, the big Jack and the little Jack. And so it takes the same story. It's just a kind of like fan fiction. Like it's just another point of view of it. And it compares both the giant Jack and the human Jack as being these ordinary shy boys who have fears, who are curious about the other world, the unknown, who want to go and venture into something different than the world that they've been brought up in. And basically it shows how like people that are different, who are scared to each other, actually have the same common fears, goals, and beautifulness, and how they both decide they're going to take that leap and go towards the thing that is different and scary and new. And so little Jack goes up, big Jack goes down, and then they end up finding each other, being afraid, and then learning that actually they're not that different, and just because they are technically different, that they share values and they can become friends. So I think that that's a great way to like take a story that is common and known and make it into something that can be translated into a different theme using the same motif and characters of a story that's well known. And then Sleeping Beauty is just another example. I'm going to skip this one, but it's basically this Sleeping Beauty. Okay, I won't skip it. This Sleeping Beauty, instead of being the traditional story, it just takes the title and the idea of like sleeping through the night, but it pretty much translates it into a modern urban what's the word, motif, the setting and scenario, and has this girl who sleeps and dreams and kind of like sleeps to get away from a reality and has a beautiful life in her sleeping, dreaming world. But then her friend, the moon, convinces her that or maybe it was the sun, that she needs to go and kind of like get out of bed and go and face the world, even though it might be scary, that she has what it takes. So that's kind of another way of, and that also is a good example of like simple graphics that aren't from a like seasoned illustrator. Um, and then and this one here is a good example of taking the Aesop story that I talked about earlier, the ant and the grasshopper, and translating it into using it as a prompt for a new story. So this person selected the grasshopper and the ant, and from there she said, okay, how can I make this a story that's something new? So she created a scene that was connected to her own Asian heritage, which was two sisters in a kind of modern apartment, and one sister represented the ant and the other sister represented the grasshopper. And then she would do clever things like they were reading, you can see here the grasshopper and the ant, like they were reading that book and they'd thrown it down as the kids are both arguing. The mom says she's making cookies. Can you guys please help? One sister is like, I will help. And the other one's like, nah, I want to play. And of course you can tell what happens. Like the one sister helps, the other one doesn't do anything. One's the grasshopper, one's the ant. You can tell by the colors. Um, and then once the cookies are made and, summer is over and winter is coming and it's too late, the little sister wants to have the cookies that she didn't help making. And the mother says no. And look at how brilliant this is, where the grasshopper and the ant is on the apron. And so she faces the reality of making the consequence of like making the poor decision and not planning ahead. But there's redemption in this story. She doesn't die in the snow, and she ends up being the person that cleans up and earns her way back into having her cookie. So you can have reality, you can have like the thing that's like bad because you didn't do the right thing, but then you can have a redemption added to it as well. But if she ended the story with her not getting a cookie, I might still be okay with it right there. Like, I mean, I like what she did there, but I wouldn't be against it because we got to learn those lessons. Delayed gratification is a very key important lesson for kids. If they don't learn that, they're going to have a terrible life. Okay, and then also I've been pushing more of these stories with biblical themes, and also I like the idea of where we came from, whether it's a Cherokee legend or whether it's from the Judeo-Christian point of view. And so whoops, how did I get the flowers? Okay, I guess I put the wrong link in there. But that book is about the Adam and Eve story, but without saying Adam and Eve. And there's a serpent. Darn it! Why did I not put the right link? Okay, I didn't. I'll share that later in another class. And then this one here is also the idea of taking a story. This is actually based on a story from Japan called The Stone Cutter. Oops. And the Stone Cutter, what happened? The Stone Cutter is about a person who's a stone cutter who wanted to be more than they were. And they kept wanting, they saw somebody in the town that was an important business person. They wanted to be that, so they became that. And then they saw somebody who was the king. They wanted to be that. And then they saw the mountains. They wanted to be that. And eventually this stonecutter was like the sky, but then it regretted because it missed being the simple person that there was. So basically a day of adventure was that taking that same exact premise and translating it to, oh my God, I didn't make these links right. I'll show this one later too, but basically the day of adventure, this is about a girl who lives in Japan in modern times in Tokyo, and she wants to be more, and she imagines that she wishes she could be a bird so she could fly. She wishes she could be the sun, so and she ends up becoming all these things, and then finally she wants to go home, and she hears her mother calling and goes back. And then this is a example of, and let's see if I made this one right. Okay, good. This one's an example of taking a story from your own childhood, like literally, like this person from last year had this story told to them. Her and her brother and sister were told about Mop and Pop and the adventures of these two bunny rabbits who were brothers and sisters, to kind of mirror the brother and sister relationship that this person had, Julia. And this idea of being in this world where you were bunny rabbit and then having the typical trouble of getting along with your sibling and not being able to share easily and being resentful and not valuing your own most important relationship, your sibling, the person who's going to be with you the longest in your life. And then having a squabble, and then having, I think it was Mop, wander off into the other outside the gate into another yard or outside the yard into dangerous territory, and then being attacked by a dog, and Pop hearing it and coming to her aid, and her being injured, and then have yes, and so having danger and safe, and it's not, it's like there is danger beyond the walls, and to show that, but not in a too scary way. But we need to kids need to know you can't touch the stove or you can't go off on your own. We need to learn these lessons without actually getting hurt. So like not being afraid of that and showing, there's a little scratch here, so it's not a gory thing, although it probably would be a gory thing if a dog attacked a bunny. Um, but then having it resolve itself into a stronger relationship. So I think that's just great that it was something that her mother told, and she made up our last project is making an audio digital book, and she had her mother record telling the story while her images were there. So that just turned out really fantastic. Okay, so what are we going to do here now? You got your story. The next step I want you to do now is we're going to follow the same steps as we did for our first for our first project, the baby word project. We're taking the same steps. So part one, I want you to do a research concept deck, and you already know what this is. You're going to research your story. You're going to find out more about it. You're going to see if there's other variations of the design, like showcase any designs that were done. Maybe there aren't any. That's okay if there aren't. And then you're gonna begin to research design inspiration, like look for things that you think might be good techniques, good color treatments, good typography, graphic layouts, illustration techniques, collage, whatever it is, or maybe even showcase your own work that you've done in the past to say, this is the kind of stuff that I make and I want to apply this to what I do. But it's all really about making that deck that's going to tell what the same thing. First pages use the same thing. What is dirt? What's your assignment? What's your book? What's the story about? You're going to tell us a story like a fifth grade book report. You're going to tell us what your story is. You're going to tell everybody in class what your story is without reading the story, of course, and just say what the story is, and most importantly, what the moral is. Oh, I put this in the wrong place, but you can see these books at our Dirt blurb site, blurb.com/user/dirtbook, but the link is in Canvas. So here's so part one, the research concept deck. And this is basically an example. So this is a handful of clay book that we just looked at. Here is the cover page. And then, whoops, we skipped the what dirt is and what your assignment is, but never mind. So handful of clay. So here you talk about what the story is, and most importantly, bring out what the moral is or what the lesson is, or what is it that what's the benefit from this story? What is the universal moral that doesn't have anything to do with the time it was written in or the place it was written in, but the thing that applies to us as a human? What is that? We got to pull that out and know what that is. And then research on past books. And handful of clay did not exist in a book anywhere else that she could find, but there could have been a section that shows past versions of the book. So here's just, again, the same thing you did before, design inspiration to help get your mind thinking about how to do this, and then visual research and inspiration for how you want to do your book, typography. This is one technique she was interested in. And then the design approach, write out in a clear way how you want to approach the design. Here she's saying she wants to either do a traditional whimsical with earthy tones or a simple minimal bold aesthetic. She ended up doing the traditional whimsical with earthy tones to suit the vibe of the story, as she says there. And you saw that book already, so you kind of know what the result was, but this was the setup for that. So basically, here's what you need to have ready for Thursday, your version from your story that does all these things. Okay, so part 6 is on the canvas. The book template is there if you want to start working with it. Well, you don't need it yet. Nope, this is the wrong one. This is the baby board book one. Sorry. But there is a Canvas page for this assignment that should have been in here. And on that page, this is below it. I do have all links to all the books and more from Dirt that you can just go directly to if you want to look at more books to do more research. And you can use these books for your research if you want in the research section. You can showcase a Dirt book. That always helps for the A-making machine to feel good about itself. And then I also list all the options we had and everyone's choice so far. So if you are having second thoughts and you want to go and look at other things, or if just here's your chance, like check those out. Okay, so make sure you have a cover page with your name, an overview page that summarizes your fables and morals, a survey, past design, illustration, executions, a page of imagery that presents your visual research, inspiration, and potential approaches, and then a written outline of your potential design, illustration, approach. And of course, you must always have that thank you page and be full of gratitude. Okay, whew, got through it. Okay, that's it for this. There's a lot going on this week, but that's it for now. So got to focus. We don't fall behind. Wrap up one thing, start the next thing. Doing two things at once is an important lesson because believe me, I know this week I've been doing a million things at once. And you got to have that skill as a designer. And I know you got other classes too, so you're already doing it. But let's think from all sides of our brain and get all this work done so that we can have a good, productive class on Thursday and look at a lot of ideas while also knowing that you've wrapped up your first project and it's on its way to the printer. Thanks so much, guys, and we will see you soon. And we'll see you in class Thursday. All right, everyone in class Thursday. And it might be a new classroom. I'll let you know by email. See you later.